Welcome to SOapbox, the official podcast from Spencer Ogden. In this series, titled Voices of the Energy Transition, we explore the major forces reshaping the global energy industry. Each quarter, we'll tackle one key theme across talent, ESG, financing, and innovation. Hosted by our team members in Australia, New York, London, Malaysia, and beyond, SOapbox delivers regional insights and expert perspectives to help you stay ahead in the energy transition.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Spencer Ogden official podcast, The Soapbox. I am Nicole.
And I'm Alicia. Thanks for tuning in. Today's episode is all about financing the energy transition.
And we're thrilled to be joined by someone who brings a truly unique perspective on this topic, Bryan Didier.
Hi, I'm Bryan Didier. I'm the managing director of the energy team at Monarch Private Capital. We are essentially a tax mitigation firm that works with our primarily corporate and Fortune 500 clients on minimizing their tax liability by making impact investments across a number of federal and state credit opportunities. And primarily among those is the energy credits, which my group works.
Fantastic. And you have a very impressive yet kind of unconventional career path from serving as a naval officer, getting your JD, practicing law, and then pivoting to build a career in renewable energy finance. Can you kind of walk us through how you got to where you are today?
I had the privilege of serving for a little over 10 years on active duty as a Navy helicopter pilot, also did a tour as an admiral's aide. Fantastic experience, and then continued that for another 12 years during reserve duty while attending law school and then working as a practicing attorney. Worked as an active attorney for about 20 years. All of that essentially in the energy sector, and with about the last 15 years more specialized in the energy tax credit field before moving over to Monarch Private Capital a couple years ago, where they were one of my clients. And so I moved over into the business role leading the team. And I've been very lucky to do that both in a servant leadership process throughout my Navy career, but also I think in what I've been able to do as an attorney and now working for what we feel is the better good with impact investments.
Yeah, well, that's definitely a unique career path. We really enjoy your perspective on this front. For those who are not very familiar with your firm, Monarch, would you be able to tell us a little bit more about the organization and what exactly your team specializes in?
Yeah, so the company itself is a little over 20 years old now. And we work essentially with corporate America and taking what is otherwise their sunk cost of a tax liability and channeling that into an investment vehicle. So that is through federal credits such as historic rehabilitation credits and low-income housing tax credits, new market tax credits, or the federal energy tax credits paying to the government, self-channeling that tax liability into something where they're getting a tax credit and also some other portion of return and can choose to make a difference with those investments. Ability to total credit and tax transfer transactions, a lot of that fueled with the growth that we had in the emergence of the credit transfer field post changes under the Biden administration.
Great. And with Monarch's main kind of business proposition being specializing within tax credits, I'm sure there's a lot of discussion right now about OBBB and how that will impact the business. And generally within the market right now, there's a lot of talk as well. We're excited to hear your perspective, both on the changes within the industry, but also the future for renewable energy. So to start at a high level, could you kind of walk us through the bill and what it entails?
Yeah, so I love the moniker OBBB. That's my favorite one. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act was essentially a very large reconciliation bill that was passed and signed into law on July 4th by the president. The main focus of that law was extending a significant number of the tax cuts that are enacted by the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act back in 2017, making those permanent. There were a number of other provisions involved, some of which were restructuring the energy credits that we'll talk about today, but then it also delivered on some other campaign promises in the tax area. So for us in the energy field, there were a few significant changes. So under the current law, we had a couple of technology neutral credits as long as you had no carbon emission from those credits. What it did was restructure and say, okay, we're going to take a look, and we believe that a couple of the credit technologies, being solar and wind, have had 20 years of tax credit support, and it's time to be ceasing that much subsistence to those two type of technologies. So what it did is set up different parameters where the credits for solar and wind are expiring sooner. The other credits are still generally for the longer period. One of the others is the overlay of what's called foreign entity of concern, which I think we all in the industry agree with. Supply chains are in part for some of these technologies really incumbent upon both raw materials or goods themselves that are manufactured in countries where we would prefer not to be doing as much business, specifically China. So that's one other portion of the law that says if too much of your supply chain is coming from China, or if you have influence from China because of ownership or other restrictions on your business. So those are the primary changes that we saw.
Interesting. Okay, so it seems like they are kind of pivoting away from the support of the traditional renewable assets. So I would also be curious to hear what larger changes you do foresee in the industry because of the bill outside of traditional tax equity. Like, what creative financing structures or partnerships are you anticipating to emerge in the market? Are there going to be new models that you think will become like more mainstream in the next 12 to even 18 months, or just other room for opportunity?
Yeah, I think the biggest immediate change we're going to see is, given the more limited lifespan, if you will, of the solar and wind, there can be a couple of things that happen. One is, that we're seeing right now is a rush to preserve those credits, as much of those credits we can for as long a period as we can. So there will still be a large core investment opportunity there. At the same time, though, looking at where the energy resource mix can be and what can support our growing demand need, it's very obvious that things like storage are going to become even more important. And because those continue essentially at their current level for credit support, that will become a more dominant investment part of the industry. Then looking to some of the others, nuclear has good support from OBBB, as well as some of the fuel credits. Those got an extension under OBBB. So we will see more and more push into those areas as far as a credit stream, and it will naturally push some of our generation mix or other uses for energy sources to those type of credits. Inventing those structures a lot in the last few years. Traditionally, tax credits were always done under a partnership arrangement. There were really three primary structures. Whether you did a sale leaseback, you transfer to someone else, but you lease it back and operate it, allows one party to harvest the credits, the other still kind of gets the operating revenue benefit. Or the primary ways I think we've used in tax equity, which are the lease pass-through and the partnership flip. Both those involve sort of a multi-level partnership arrangement where an investor is in the transaction and their primary return resource is the tax credits, some depreciation, and some portion of the cash returns. After we had the Inflation Reduction Act, it opened up the door to new Code Section 6418, which, without getting into the nuanced numbers, but allowed for transfers of certain credits between taxpayers. So a little more of a free exchange. You don't have to be a partner in the endeavor. You can just sell the tax credit to someone else. Some of the structures that emerged there was more of a joint venture where a developer would bring a project to near fruition, have another part enter into a joint venture, and then sell the credits out of that, or sell them directly, or then for production type credits that can be held by the original developer and only the credit is transferred. Gives them a little more freedom to operate in a manner they want to, not have some of the requirements you normally have, a sort of, kind of having certain contracted levels of revenue for that investor is going to take that as part of the return vehicle. But if you're only investing for the credit, you're just more concerned about a baseline production level or baseline operational level, and the owner is more free to operate that on a, call it entrepreneurial basis and take advantage of contracting or different areas. So that was one of the primary things. I think we'll see some additional evolutions there now with the credits. We're still seeing refinement in how those joint ventures operate. I think we'll see a little more creativity in those. I think for some of the other credits, we may see some of those credits start to utilize back to the partnership flip structure we always use for production credits on some new revenue streams. That seems to be an opportunity. And then you'll also have some creative financing where someone may take more of an equity piece in a transaction in return for the credits, invest in that manner without kind of the partnership flip overlay where it's more of a tax play. I think you'll see a little bit more traditional investment that is getting just the equity return, but also the credit return.
Great. That's definitely interesting. And how do you see this impacting maybe standard like IPPs or developers that are just focused on solar and storage? Do you see them kind of branching into these other energies where they could get some of the credits, or how do you see that playing out?
Yeah, I think the first part is going to be sort of the rush to the altar to preserve as much credit as they can. As they do that, they'll take a look at kind of the dual overlay of do they qualify for the credit and then restrictions, because there's different phase-in windows for those FIOC restrictions. Phase in if you don't begin construction by the end of the year, whereas you have until next July 4th to begin construction, still have the longer runway for the solar and wind credits. So the first thing they'll do is as much as they can to build their pipeline of projects. Then they will do a little bit of playing Tetris to see how they can get things to fit to maximize opportunity. In the meantime, they're also going to be very attentive to what are related technologies. If I've done a lot of battery as part of my solar, do I continue doing battery only? There are going to be some instances where still doing that battery and solar, even without the solar having the credit, are still going to make sense. And what it will be is some rework probably of energy pricing that we'll naturally see come across the industry that will still make some of those structures work. But they'll also take a look at what else do I do? Have I done manufacturing? Do I change my manufacturing to take advantage of these other opportunities? The fuels are a little more specific on that area, but they'll also take a look at any type of emerging technology and say, where else do I have capability? Where can I hire that capability? Where do I have finance capability to quickly pivot myself and take advantage of this longer runway?
I'd be curious to hear a little bit more about these financing structures and how investor appetite has shifted since the passage of the bill, if anything at all. Are you seeing interest in any particular asset classes, projects, or different types of energies?
Yeah, I think that the big thing for the investor market is really the 3 C's, which is, certainty, clarity, and consistency. When you talk to a tax director or a CFO, she wants to know how long is this opportunity available, right? And how much is it going to change? If I'm going to dedicate my internal time and resources to this, and I've got to go explain it to the board, I don't want to go tell them a new strategy every year and have questions. So that drives the investor behavior, which is why I think it's key to have at least that 5-year horizon is kind of a key number. Investors that were a little less certain on storage are suddenly saying, what can you tell me about storage? I've done storage alongside battery. How do I get comfortable doing that storage by itself? That's certainly an opportunity. The inclusion of fuel cells was a pretty exciting ad because that's something, when you think about it, isn't a large footprint. So that new technology is something that's already getting attention. And certainly people remain interested in, the utility scale solar as long as that is available. What we do need to see the follow on and make sure as we continue to unpack OB cubed and any other additional regulations and guidance that come out, that we do have that certainty on availability of the credit, that clarity on how rules for qualification and ongoing compliance and monitoring apply, and then consistency in how that's applied. So I think those 3 C's are really the key. And we have seen a lot more interest in the fuels as well, just because of that necessary extension there. People are starting to talk about nuclear. That's a longer play, but people are very interested in that as a resource. And someone coming from the Navy who had a brother that served on nuclear submarines, and for a time myself served on nuclear carriers. Absolutely, right? Nuclear power is pretty amazing and a technology we've mastered really well. We just need to have the financing to bring that back and the timeline to do so.
That's great. And I think we've seen the same sort of trends on the hiring side as well, and what people are starting to look at as their next addition to their teams.
That's really exciting to hear that even though there is a switch given this bill, there is still a lot of runway and opportunity for new energies and new functions and strategy and processes. So I guess to switch a little bit away from the bill, I would like to hear about your perspective on hiring trends in the industry given these changes. Like, how do you think Monarch would kind of evolve their scope over the next few years? Like, what type of roles or functions are you seeing kind of being a large growth aspect within your business?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, I always like to say when I was on the legal side, it's great to be specialized because you have a niche and that niche carries a premium. First of all, when you're an initial mover in a space, you understand it better than someone else does. And then you can carry that expertise forward. Stepping back from that though, even though you may be somewhat of a specialist in an area and have that area of expertise, you're still a generalist, right? You have skills that are transferable across a particular type of working. And one of those is just in the finance and underwriting and investments. And that's what we do at Monarch. We really sit as external expertise for our clients where they're very, very good at running their business. But their business may be insurance, their business may be banking, their business may be manufacturing. Where we bring the specialization is in the tax liability and minimizing that tax liability for them and staying abreast of trends and opportunities. So we will continue to grow, we will continue to hire, and we will look for that talent that we bring in that is a general talent and a passion to learn new industries and develop that 10,000 hours in an area to where we are an expert. And then we will sit again as the outside resource and expertise for our clients. I think that's very true for the industry though, right? We've got talent. We also we're all in the energy field. Electrons are electrons. They've got a source, but they still got to hit the grid. They still got to work. You still have to solve for things like grid stability, grid reliability, bandwidth of the grid. Where can you site a project so you can deliver that resource right where the demand for that resource is? How do you work around permitting, land use? All of those have some involvement for every energy type. So I think there is a lot of recycling, if you will, of the talent within the industry and something that's only growing. I mean, all the projections say that with AI and other electrification and industrialization, our energy need is only growing. And so therefore, the energy area is a great place to continue to be, and we will continue to reinvent ourselves and recycle that talent into new opportunities. So, if I'm saying I'm banking on the future, I'm not only banking on the future myself, but my daughter's a young professional in the energy industry. And I told her it was a great place to be and will continue to be a great place to be. So I owe it to her to help make that come true with what we're doing. There's still be competition for talent, and there's still a need for talent. If you have those core skills to unpack technology, understand the narrative of what that technology can and cannot do, and where the subsidies, incentives, applications of that, and just a general financing structure. How does capital work? Debt, equity, other pieces. Pulling all of that together will still be a skill that is very desirable in the industry.
That's great. And obviously, we love to hear about the longevity within the market and the importance of being able to diversify your skill set. But in your opinion, would you say that there are any specific technical or financial skill sets that you're already seeing an increased demand for?
Yeah, I think certainly one thing that we're probably moved to with the storage and then moving to nuclear and fuels, some of the understanding of the energy markets rather than having just the long-term PPAs that we've been able to negotiate for solar and wind for a long time, or even hedges for batteries. Some of those will be shorter duration. That works best for the developer for a rising energy cost environment. Why lock yourself into a long-term contract that either has a stagnant energy price or a very small escalator if we really think it's rising? You want to continue to capture that. So that's going to require some better understanding and forecasting prediction of those energy markets themselves. It's also going to require some change in the debt markets, right? You may be doing more and more of where you've got a shorter tenor note that you're going to service with a longer amortization schedule and expecting to refinance that, which again requires real assurance on where that revenue stream is, but also on the other side, what your operating profile is. We've seen change in the operating profile. The big one people recognize in the industry is just the cost of property and casualty insurance, and some predictive measures there, and really understanding what is my discrete risk in this area versus some other area, provide appropriate reserves against that, and having better operating histories for these technologies will drive when you're going to replace certain equipment, whether you do that proactively, reactively, and managing that system optimally are going to be some of the additional skills that we'll see. Of course, anything that is fuels type and where we can simply, hey, things require some type of fuel, whether it's sort of free feedstock for wind or solar, whether it's something you can regenerate, whether it's a landfill for natural gas or a dairy source or something like that, or whether it's something else that you're just using as a fossil type fuel. Understanding that fuel mix and where that long-term pricing is will also be very competitive field to work on those areas. That gives you your predictive cost in the rising energy environment. A few key skills, obviously the basic core finance skills, acute understanding of energy markets and variables, and then controlling the cost structure. Those will all be necessary, but within the different sectors, there will be certain overlay. So again, taking the general and be able to apply it to specific and quickly delve in and have the passion and intelligence to understand those and apply them.
I feel like specialization is definitely a theme across a lot of what you're sharing. So I would be curious for anyone that is listening and thinking about moving into renewable energy, kind of what advice would you give them in terms of longevity and long-term career path within renewable energy finance?
I think it's just exactly that you've got to reinvent and recycle yourself. You want to turn yourself into an expert, but never lose those general skills. So as new opportunities come along, you can embrace them. And, you want to embrace those with good organizations and good people. And the energy industry, the credit industries, finance industry has long reinvented itself time and time again for where opportunity is. And so when you can find that group, accept an initial opportunity, don't ask for too much too soon, embrace the chance to learn and learn from good people. And then eventually you're a core component of that team and you're a leader of that team. So, yeah, I would say don't shy away from something that sounds rather nuanced. Embrace that as an opportunity to build specialization. And if that specialization doesn't work, doesn't wind up having a future, you still have those general skills that allow you to specialize somewhere else.
Yeah, I overall feel like a theme throughout this conversation is, even though there's been a lot of uncertainty, there's more so opportunity moving forward, which is really positive, kind of given what's been going on in the space. So before we do close, any other final thoughts that you would like to leave our listeners with?
Yeah, I would just say, for those who are a little shook up on the OB cubed and what it means, what it really has done is sort of moved us back to where the industry had been for 15 plus years, right? Until the Inflation Reduction Act, we've been under a series of extensions for various credits, and the technologies kept proving themselves time and time again in proving the need for that resource, how it could operate, and the credit as being not something that just allows the development of the resource, but creates an industry where we can be a technology leader and be an exporter of that energy and the technology to the rest of the world. So I would say, talk to those who've been around a little longer, look at what we have. We have a good runway. We, in fact, still have a better runway than we had for many years. Throw yourself in, be an expert, embrace with passion, and trust that we'll continue to utilize these resources and use the necessary government support and backing to maintain America's energy dominance.
That's great. And thanks again, Bryan, for joining us. We really appreciate your time and your perspective.
It was a privilege. Really appreciate the opportunity. Thanks so much for hosting me.
And thank you for everyone for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow and share. It helps us keep bringing you conversations at the intersection of finance and the energy transition.
Until next time, this is Alicia and Nicole from Spencer Ogden. Talk soon.
Thanks for listening to Soapbox. If you've got thoughts or questions about today's episode, reach out to us via our website, spencer-ogden.com. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and follow Spencer Ogden on LinkedIn for updates, insights, and behind-the-scenes content. Founded in 2010, Spencer Ogden is a global recruitment leader in sustainability, natural resources, and infrastructure. With 12 offices worldwide and over 380 specialists, we connect top talent across the full energy value chain, from finance to design to operations. Powered by our purpose of creating careers to power a sustainable future, we've spent 15 years building deep partnerships with clients and candidates to help drive the energy transition forward. We'll see you next time on Soapbox.